The MBTI function called sensing seems to be closely, if not directly, related to the fight response in survival. When we are in survival mode, we pay extreme attention to our surroundings. Hence, everything physical becomes more crisp and detailed than it would be otherwise. I therefore present the idea that sensing types might be chronically stuck in the fight response. Keep in mind that this is meant to be an exploration or hypothesis more than a claim. I will later explain why intuition may correlate to the freeze response as an opposing orientation, which is why intuitives may struggle with physical reality. The idea is that sensing types prefer to see something in order to believe it, exactly because they mostly pay attention to the physical world. In order to validate something as physically real, it can probably be directly perceived in our environment. Sensing types are reactive. When the environment stimulates an inner instinct, they tend to act on that instinct. Hence, they are likely to repeat behavior that humans have done in the past if it succeeded in reproduction or survival, both for better and for worse. It's likely, however, that their body is rather healthy in contrast to intuitive personalities because their instincts seem to work when they should. Whatever humanity has done for thousands of years seems to serve them rather well, otherwise they would not depend on it so much. Not only are they reactive, as if automatic wisdom decides for them, but they are also, in contrast to intuitives, very aware of what their reactions are and the sensation of it happening. This is because they have a detailed perception of the physical world and live in their bodies in a very interoceptive and visceral fashion. Notice also how intuitive heroes in sensing grip can suddenly become even more impulsive and reactive, almost like an explosion of animal content. In these more rare instances, they become hypersensor personalities, noticing every sensory stimulus to a degree even surprising for sensor heroes themselves. When a person is not stuck in extreme ends of survival mode, it instead becomes ego identity and boundaries in which a personal reality or habitual movement is formed. Its fight response and anger become healthier for normal contexts and help the entity build or assess boundaries, resulting in a sense of relaxed safety for itself. It may seem as though this more relaxed state is not a fight mode, but in truth it probably is more so that the state has relaxed to a calmer state of survival instead of relaxing to a completely and fully lighthearted, creative extent. And that's why sensor heroes do not tend to be creative. They always keep a level of fight turned on because they believe in the earth real as it's everything that is, and as if only hard work is working. Since ego, according to Kataronic's definitions, means to revolve around itself as if a rotating earth globe, a physical thing, knows what revolves around itself because it is itself. It calls it the self, or the am in I am. It is the identity of a physical property existing in space and time. Thus, it asserts itself and its boundaries as if existent, and energy around it has to respond to that assertion of entity. Pete Walker's theories on the fight response seem, therefore, to directly correlate with the sensing function in MBTI. And while you might easily see how this can be related to extroverted sensing, you may be puzzled by how this also can possibly be related to introverted sensing. Introverted sensing is largely associated with self-focused boundaries and intimate awareness of one's own body or own habitual structure. Since boundaries and habits as such require discipline, could it also be described as a possible fight response, in which one fights against oneself inwardly? The new habit becomes a result of fighting the habitual flow of everybody else, until it changed or resisted, and as such the inner physical identity changed to else than the collective one, therefore did not blindly mimic other humans as a result. One could as well explain this as an assertion against one's collective self, and therefore makes the words fight, assertion, and boundary somewhat synonymous. Just to mention similar, also not in context with the collective substance. To develop a habit with discipline and maintain it in a way that wears down on inner conflicting habits over time could also be seen as a fight against oneself, in which the fighting component needs to be an individual habitual momentum against one's former individual momentum. It can be demonstrated as easily as starting to train every day all year, even if one does not feel like it. The MBTI function, called intuition, seems to be closely, if not directly, related to the freeze response in survival. When we are in freeze response, an organism stops moving and looks completely still, as if dead. This looks a lot like a meditation when calm, or like an animal playing dead when threatened. Other examples are how we tend to sit completely still when we philosophize or think deep thoughts about existence. We may also completely stop and look up to the sky before evaluating choices in which we want to decide from a free-willed place. The idea is that intuitives are actually disembodying their body or current identity configuration when tapping into their intuition. Hence, is intuition capable of more than just a slightly high bird's-eye pattern recognition experience, but instead it is literally capable of entering the portal of the dead. That means as if having an NDE experience and connecting to the afterlife or pre-birth of who we are as consciousness itself. While imagination and spirituality can be used as a way to escape the pain of the earth as a coping mechanism, may it also be the very substance, or superstance I should say, which is able to heal and comfort the pain as required in such a cathartic encounter needed for pain to be forgiven and released. Possibly, can one grasp heaven's love as well as its higher perspective on what has occurred, helping an individual through the repressed pain in a way that is final or complete? It's like being a crying baby in the hands of divinity itself. In contrast to the fight response, will the freeze response not focus on the environment and the physical reality, possibly revealing afterlife and its content by retreating all energy consumed for the perception of environment? Intuition doesn't actually try to see in order to believe. Instead, it believes in order to see if what it believes is apparent and real in its future effect. It ultimately reveals subjective substance, such as the ability to placebo, which reveals the strength and usefulness of unconditional confidence in the faithful and invisible in ourselves. Nonsense, such as active imagination in Carl Jung's theory, is the bridge in which intuitive substance is to be known. One imagines it independently and gives it a trust fall to see if anything was able to catch you. If caught, the substance or superstance is revealed as real, and whatever belief that blocked its appearance before is lifted. If this theory is true, intuitives are more likely to be traumatized people on a physical level. They were forcefully led to depend on their non-sensory faculties for most of their lives. Hence, does it look like nonsense for others? Not only does it look like nonsense, but the corruption in their traumatized sensing faculties will still bleed out as survival insanity, distorting heavenly truth with primitive ideas such as demonic rituals, which is, in actuality, originating from physical disorder rather than pure intuition. The MBTI function called feeling seems to be closely, if not directly, related to the fawn response in survival. Fawn wants harmony between people, just like the heart wants for consciousness itself. When in survival, the physical heart might want to fit in with a group or a family, because it knows this was useful for survival in the past. One can also see how it makes people less hostile, and how it makes it possible to draw out people's good side so they are improved as people over time. Alternatively, this can also be utilized as a self-defense to minimize harm to oneself as well as everyone else. Yet, does it promote the idea of using either healing or emotional satisfaction as a way to protect oneself? And in these instances, can it become maladaptive in the way it also avoids healthy conflict? Healthy heart feelings also want conflict. Not because conflict is super in itself, but because resolving conflict as two is a form of real love, which cannot be done if underlying conflicts are too delayed or completely avoided. The fawn and people-pleasing concept is easy to connect with extroverted feeling, but we can theorize that introverted feeling similarly can be fawning towards oneself, similar to how an INFP child may resist vegetables very strongly in order to satisfy his own feelings. Introverted feeling might serve herself in a similar way to how extroverted feeling serves the feelings of others. The pleasing and validating emotions associated with fawning also become a problem if irrational or logically unrealistic, which results in stuff like martyrdom from ideals in heaven or, on the other side, neediness from addiction in earth. One could say that emotional desire can make one both too selfish as either individuals or collectives, as well as too selfless as individuals or collectives. Therefore, its real overall dysfunction is not in harmony and value itself when we talk about feeling as a general phenomenon, but instead the dysfunction behind poor fawn experiences happens if one is always disconnected with the logical rationale, both the physical cortex rationale as well as the philosophical one. Creative fawn responses should ideally be short, reflecting the submission required in benefit of the doubt, and rightfully ended if a few chances were given in vain. Peak fawn response from deep earth, as in survival method, should, however, be continued until it's possible to flee from the dangerous people involved. That being said, let's also remember that if a being wants to listen to the electromagnetic field of their heart and be sensitive to what expands or opens it on real, they do have to attend to their interpersonal emotions harmonically, both in a physical and metaphysical way. Then be able to mediate between the two in order to find an ideal for the current state of oneself. This is, if you will, a recipe of true taste and like, and must inevitably be the only place in which one can hold the real self as desire or love. The MBTI function called thinking seems to be closely, if not directly, related to the flight response in survival. The more anxiety we have, the more we think. We think of solutions and how to do something or how something works, just in case we can escape the possible outcome that might face us if we do not understand what is about to hit us. If we run from it, we can think of a plan or understand it before it catches up to us, so that we can be prepared and handle it with the knowledge required. Flight thinking can take many different forms, even the form of a workaholic personality, having a lot of phone calls and busy meetings to attend. This is cleverly done, as the person performing it might not even realize he is on the run by default, actually avoiding personal or relational content. Their excuses can stereotypically be that they don't have enough time for their wife or for family because they climbed the ranks at their job or bought an expensive house, not realizing the unconscious set that up on purpose. Even a job offer that makes one have to move far away might feel strangely attractive, disguised as strategic thoughts hidden for the sake of relational avoidance. It can be both avoidance of personal relationships with others, or even with oneself. That being said, when not in survival flight, the thinking function also allows us to be objective or have the perception of systemic content such as math, geometry, and industry. Thinking tends to often dissociate from feeling and desire so that it feels logically complete and cohesive, allowing sometimes one to see something completely without desire involved in the assessment. This is very useful in fields such as math, and also in science that involve very little of consciousness or personal substance. In many ways, can thinking even shut down all relational perception and understanding, even as a coping mechanism if needed. It makes one into an aromantic robot at the most extreme. Yet it's still important to consider that sometimes this is the healthy thing to do, especially if one is stuck in the emotionality of a repeating and negative experience, proven to be unresolvable through emotional processing alone. This dynamic of using thoughts to correct emotion and emotion to correct thought creates a paradoxical brain-heart coherence for a more transcendent understanding of the feeling-thinking axis. This forces thinking to accept the irrational as a part of the cohesive truth of existence, or in the very least as a gateway for the finding of it, which might be scary for one who has never leaned on the poetic. No worries. The heart loves a smart brain. It's a superpower. By the way, you should take the Cataronics MBTI test. You find it by searching Cataronics on Google. I hope you liked the Cataronics theory on Pete Walker's trauma personalities chart. Integrating everyday psychology to the archetypal origin of existence as a whole being, heart, brain, heaven and earth,